Hello, friends. I'm Dr. David Litwa, and I want to warmly welcome you to my series on the Naassenes. One of the points that the author of the Refutation of All Heresies says in criticism of the Naassenes is that they sing hymns, and that they sing hymns to the human. That is, the human with a capital H, the God human, the model of humanity, and the true expression of God. Now, one of these hymns, commonly called a psalm, has been preserved, and apparently preserved complete. It is called the Naassene Psalm. Some of you may be familiar with it. It is often taken as a kind of quintessential expression of Gnostic spirituality and is widely quoted in certain handbooks and online. But I think it's important to understand the Naassene Psalm as the Naassene Psalm. That is, it represents actually a very particular theology and worship practice, the practice of the Naassenes. And so I've taken it upon myself in this series just to go through line by line this psalm or poem, as it were, and just to explain parts of it according to the larger picture of what we know of Naassene thought and practice. And I'm hoping that this will whet your interest so that you'll study more of Naassene theology and understand what a wealth of riches this early Christian group created. So this is my translation of the psalm, and I'm going to read it as slowly and carefully as I can to encourage you to meditate and to think about the words as I give you my own take. It begins, the principal injunction of the universe is the first intellect. The second after the firstborn is chaos outspread. Soul as third received and performed the injunction. In this stanza, which in Greek is actually, according to poetic meter, we are introduced to three beings. The first is intellect, the second is firstborn, and the soul is third. Now, some might say that the second is chaos, and I want to give due weight to chaos, but I don't view chaos as an independent principle here. We are about a generation before the revolution brought on by Plotinus and his circle, which distinguished forever a one above intellect. But for many thinkers in the second century, God was an intellect, a thought thinking himself, or a thought thinking itself in Aristotelian language. And this intellect is the law or injunction of the universe. It provides a code for how the universe is to run. The firstborn is the son or child of the human. And soul is a kind of lower manifestation of the human as it exists in living creatures, including human beings. So these three principles, this triad, is actually more technically a dyad or a binitarian theology in which you have a human and a son of human, and then you have eternal chaos and a lower manifestation of the son being caught in chaos and functioning as the soul. And it's the soul which needs to be redeemed and brought out of chaos so that it is reunited with the second principle, or the firstborn. On this account, clothed in the form of a deer, soul grows weary, prey to death, and dominated. It's said in the Psalms that the soul pines for God as the deer pants for a spring of water. The soul as a deer is an image that's rooted in the Bible. The soul is feminine grammatically in Greek, and so are to imagine the soul as a female who is not only tired, but dominated and ultimately a subject to death. Soul by itself should be unweary, but when it is attached or bound together with chaos, it has the capacity to grow tired. It has the capacity to be dominated by sense perceptions, violent emotions, and to be tempted away from its own good, and eventually to die. The death of the soul is not necessarily the total evaporation of its existence, but its utter distraction and drunkenness in a world in which it cannot know its true self or has simply lost interest in knowing that. Sometimes endowed with royalty, she or the soul sees the light. At other times, she weeps, thrown into olive oil. She weeps for herself and rejoices. She weeps and is judged. Now, this is one of the odder set of lines in the Naassene Psalm. And I think scholars rightly expect here that there is some sort of corruption in the manuscript. We only have one single manuscript for the Naassene Psalm, so we have nothing to compare it with. And what I've translated here is what the Greek says. I haven't attempted to change the Greek to make it say something that makes more sense. I want to be faithful to what we have, but in the end, you should all know that we may here be dealing with some textual corruption. The soul as royal expresses her true nature. The soul is able to see the light, expresses the true nature of the soul. She is a manifestation of the Son of Human. She is a divine being. She is born, but she's divine. But in the flesh, the soul is subject to the constant battering of human perception, the temptations of pleasure and the aversions of pain, and wild, sometimes bipolar emotions, so that her weeping and rejoicing represent a kind of swing from one place to another. Her weeping leading to judgment may indicate some final judgment scenario. The line that she is thrown into olive oil is often amended so that she is thrown into something else, like a cave or something. But I've kept the text as is, and I think that that's important because oil was important to the Naassenes. They were involved in an anointing ritual. Whether they anointed people before baptism or after baptism, we don't know. But we know that they anointed people, and the ointment was important for them. Whether or not they were using olive oil or whether this is a reference to the oil of anointing, I honestly don't know. But I'm hoping that many of you will also have insight on this text and bring it to the table. She is judged and dies, then she is born. Miserable in her misfortunes, she entered the inescapable labyrinth to wonder. These are very powerful lines, and they bring up a number of emotions. The labyrinth is, of course, a reference to the great maze constructed by Minos of Crete, who put the Minotaur into the center in order to kill anyone, in this case, Theseus, who entered the labyrinth. And the only way that Theseus was able to find his way out of the labyrinth was he was given a clue that is a ball of red yarn, and he was able to retrace his steps. The judged soul dies, but she is reborn. I think we can take this as a reference to transmigration. This was an early Christian doctrine according to the Naassenes. The misery of the soul is the misery of her wandering from body to body, the inescapability of distraction in the prison house of matter, in the vessel of clay. This was the problem. The inability to graduate out of this fleshly platform and rise to a higher level of existence. This was what the soul needed, but in herself, she is unable. And so, Jesus, as if out of nowhere, out of the blue, steps out and speaks in the poem, "Look upon her father. Pursued by disasters, she wanders toward earth, away from your breath. She seeks to flee bitter chaos and knows not how she will cross it." Chaos, I think, is another name for the fluctuating and uncontrollable matter and the manifestations of matter. I think that Jesus is somewhat similar to his role in John Milton's Paradise Lost, pointing out the plight of the human soul and then asking his father, in this case, the human, to be aware and to send him. And there's a reason why Jesus is concerned about the soul who is unable to escape the system of transmigration and unable to cross the heavenly spheres. It's because the soul is a part of Jesus. The soul is the sleeping part of Jesus. The soul is a kind of intellect which has degraded and been trapped in matter. And Jesus, in rescuing the soul, wants to rescue himself. "For this reason, send me, Father," says Jesus. "Holding the seals, I will go down. I will go across all aeons. I will open every mystery." Much like Jesus in the ascension of Isaiah, the plan of salvation is for Jesus to descend through each level of heaven. And to get down through the levels, he has to hold up seals, which are either pictures or memorized phrases that are or serve as passwords to get him undetected through the tiers or levels of archons or evil rulers who are in control of the cosmos. So he goes down holding these seals, and he goes through the aeons. Aeons here appear to be spatial realms, and he opens every mystery. The mystery may here be a synonym of the seal. It's some kind of hidden content that Jesus is revealing as he goes down upon the levels of heaven, through heaven, toward earth. "I will manifest the shapes of gods. I will transmit the hidden things of the holy path, which I have called Gnosis." These are the final lines of the Naassene Psalm. I think they strongly indicate that its author was familiar with the ascension of Isaiah, that is, the secret descent of Jesus through the spheres, through the aeons. And he was also interested in the heavenly teaching, or specifically the secret teaching of Jesus, a secret teaching which is here called the Holy Path, a path called Gnosis. It's undeniable that Naassene spoke of Gnosis and referred to themselves as Gnostics, that is, knowers. But this wasn't a technical group designation. It was something that a variety of early Christian groups called themselves. The Holy Path is something slightly different. In Acts, we know that the Christian religion, as it were, was originally called the Way. And so the Holy Path is another way of referring to the whole complex network of Christian rites and symbols, which has come in modern times to be called religion. And it is also a set of teachings. And these teachings are hidden or secret. So much like we see in the Gospel of Thomas, this Jesus comes to earth, he comes down secretly, and he reveals secrets. I hope you can see that the Naassene Psalm is a beautiful poem. If it was called a psalm by the Naassenes themselves, then it's likely that it was sung or chanted in their worship. And it's one of those indications that Naassene Christians were a living Christian community practicing rites and singing together. And one of the beautiful things about the Naassene Psalm is its ability to bring out those strong and vibrant emotions or affections in order to focus the soul on its Redeemer. The desperation of the soul is expressed, but also the mercy and compassion of Jesus, who takes care of himself by taking care of the soul. And I think this is really important, that although the Naassenes were Platonists, although they were trying to transcend the flesh, transcend this earthly platform, transcend this wetsuit we call our bodies, they were still in the world practicing lived religion and being involved in worship and focusing themselves and their voices and synchronizing their emotions so that they could attain a higher state. This is really only the beginning of the interpretation of the Naassene Psalm, and I hope that if you enjoyed this presentation, you will check out my book on the Naassenes and take a look at my chapter on the Naassene Psalm, which goes into a little bit more depth and talks about another hymn or hymn fragment that the Naassenes have left us. Until we meet again, I want everyone to take care, and I want to encourage everyone to leave a comment and a like. And if you have questions or wish to support me, catch me over Patreon. Thank you again.